All right, in this video, we're going to look at the career path of a recruiter. And specifically, we're going to look at a couple of things. One, where do you start, right? Where do you start if this is a career that you want to break into? What's your first step? And then two is how do you progress, right? How do you move through that career? Whether you want to stay in the recruiter position or potentially branch off down the road, what does that progression look like? We'll talk about things like, how much money can you make? What are different roles you might want to consider? And how do you actually make those steps? So let's dive into it. And first off, we're going to start with the top. Where do you start? And to do that, we're going to talk about two different paths you can take. Two different paths. And one path is going to be in-house. And the other path is going to be through an agency, the agency route. So let's look at both these options, and we'll just kind of model these out for a second. The in-house route might look something like this typically. Typically, you'll start at a company. Let's just use our same examples as before. We got company A. We'll start at a company, and we will be a recruiter at that company. So this is company A. We are a recruiter inside of company A. We're working for company A to help them hire candidates, right? So these are the candidates. So we are working inside company A, and we are going out to the market to find candidates and bring them back or hire them at company A. So that's the in-house route, is you start inside a company, you're actually working as a recruiter for that company. Now, in the agency world, company A still exists. We've got company A. And we still got our candidates out there that we're going to go try to hire. These are candidates. But this time, instead of us working at company A, we work for the agency. And this is an agency that company A is going to hire to go find the candidates on their behalf. This is pretty typical. So this is you as the recruiter at the agency. So this is pretty typical actually for a lot of companies where they will hire an agency to go out on the market, help them find candidates, and then hire those candidates at the company. So this is pretty typical actually for a couple of different types of companies, right? A fast-growing company may not have the staff, the recruiting team internally yet to go out and find all their own candidates. So they might hire an agency to help go out into the market and find these candidates and bring them back to company A. A large company might not have the recruiters built out yet for like a very specific role. Maybe they need to go find a chief marketing officer or a VP of sales, right? Sometimes you'll hear these being called like headhunters, which is kind of like an old school term, but they might hire an agency to go help them find some leadership roles. And then, often a really small company like a startup, they definitely don't have any in-house recruiters yet. They haven't built out that team. So they are going to help, or they're going to hire sometimes an agency to help them fill a lot of different roles that they might need. So really common model here for the recruiting world is to leverage an agency to help do some of this. So those are the two paths, the two avenues that you might consider starting out on. One would be being a recruiter right off the bat at a company. This is in-house, but you could think of this as like, in company. So in the company, or being a recruiter for an agency and working with a lot of different companies to help them hire candidates along the way. And to think about these two paths here, what I think I want to model out next is I want to walk through the different type of roles that you might take at each one of these different in each one of these different paths and what the path might look like for you. So if you remember from our last video, we talked about we look at the recruiting team. The recruiting team. There's a couple different roles that you might find on a recruiting team. You might find, number one, a sourcer. And a sourcer is going to help the recruiter to source new candidates for the role. So you might have a dedicated sourcer that is. You might have a coordinator that's going to help coordinate all the meetings between the candidates and the hiring team during the interview process. And then you're definitely going to have a recruiter, of course. Now, depending on what size of company you go work out for the in-house option, let me zoom out here. And depending on the agency that you go work for, you might take one or more of these paths to end up in the recruiter position. So let's just kind of model this out, what this could look like. So I'm just going to draw a line here to separate this out. So option one might be to start as a sourcer, and then you become a coordinator, and then you become a recruiter. Option two, and I'll kind of go into details in each one of these in a second. Option two might be to be a coordinator and then a recruiter. Option three would be a sourcer and then a recruiter. And option four would be a recruiter. So why am I kind of drawing out these career paths? And the reason is because there really are a couple different ways that you might become a recruiter. And what you should be thinking about as you go through the interview process is, what does this career path look like at the company I'm talking to? And some things that you should consider along the way. You should consider the size of company, right? The size of the company. A large company versus a small company. So a large enterprise, Fortune 100 company will have a much more defined career path, like maybe example one here, versus a smaller, startup. You might be a recruiter from day one, or you might be a sourcer and then moving into a recruiter. So the size of company is definitely going to influence what this career path looks like. The second thing you should think about is, in-house. So in-house versus agency will differ as well. I'll tell you that from my experience, the in-house role will be a little bit more defined, where you go from sourcer to coordinator recruiter, or coordinator recruiter, versus in an agency, it may be a little bit more, you may end up into the recruiter role a little bit faster or sooner, or right off the bat. And then the other thing you should consider is also, the compensation that you're going to make along the way. And then the learnings as well. And I think this is always the most important one for me, is the learning that I'm gonna get out of the role. So, who are my mentors, and what is going to set me up for the most success down the road? And so think about this as you're interviewing, and you should be asking yourselves, what does the career path look like? So what does the career path look like at this company? And what does it mean for me? And you can ask this during the interview process, but these are all going to influence this path you take. And it's not to say that every agency you interview with, you're going to end up a recruiter right away, and every big company, you have to go through this process. That's just not the case. Every company is so different. Just giving you some things to look for as you're interviewing and to think about as you are going along in your journey. And there's really no right or wrong answer. Each one of these paths can be really, really impactful and successful for you. You just have to figure out what's best for you along the way. So just to wrap up this video, what I'll highlight here is a couple of things. So let's talk about compensation. What does that look like? Compensation. Typically, you'll see one of two routes. You'll see a just pure salary role, where you're just getting paid a base salary, probably in the range of, call it 50 to 75K starting off, 50 to 75K starting off in the role. Or you'll see a salary plus commission structure. And that will probably look something like, 50 to 60K salary plus an extra 10 to 20K in commission. And the pure salary type of compensation is more likely something you'll see at at an in-house role. And then the salary plus commission is more likely something you'll see at an agency role. But of course, you'll ask about this during the interview process, and they'll let you know along the way.